welcome back. Yes, indeed, as you've seen, the Senator Arishe joins us next. He's the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Privatization. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Well, for a lot of people, that report or that meeting with the CBN in the House, it appears as though he can breathe easy now. Maybe everybody can now say, oh, okay. But do you have the same feeling? You think that, well, things can have been normalized now, considering the previous opera or hoopla?
Oh, yes. Certainly. We have to thank Honorable Dogua and the CBN governor for making this clarification. I've been sure that is the position of the Constitution vis-a-vis the Act governing the central bank. You cannot declare illegal your legal tender. People started refusing to accept even the old notes. And in Senate claims, it's never supposed to happen at all. Now, you have visualized this currency. You said people should come in and exchange it, put it in the bank. I do not understand the part that says when you put the money in the bank, you can only take 20,000 or withdraw 100,000 a week. I don't know the purpose.
Now 500,000 for individuals.
Yes, for individuals, and 5 million. Is the plan to actually disrupt the economic system? We do not understand. Because, I mean, I've lived in America for a very long time, and I've never even noticed that they have changed any currency. And they've done that maybe twice since 1995. You will not even know anything. You take your money to the bank, they replace it with the new ones. There is no ASUS. But when you begin to put some stipulations, putting timelines that are not feasible, particularly for those in the rural areas, we can only get the kind of result we got the last, about a week ago. On the golf course, we couldn't pay our caddies. We paid them like 3,000 Naira. You could not even get money from the ATMs. You couldn't get money from anywhere. And now imagine the POS terminals have been serving the local communities. You now say there is no currency. The people who go there, they give them more currency, they refuse. So the economy for 3 days was practically hit.
Where do you think the miscommunication came from?
Well, again, what the governor just came out to say now, referring to Section 20 of the Act, verse 3, is the position of the law. People, if you have issued a currency and you are changing it, it's part of the rights of the CBN. But how do you now implement it is another issue. Now, when you say, and you are aware, even if not aware, the legal people in the CBN should be aware that that currency, you cannot put a time limit by which people will go and change. You issued it to the society to use. Some people have kept money in their homes. There are people who don't even have bank accounts. There are more than those who own bank accounts, maybe 2 to 1 in the country. Now you look at it, okay, you want to implement this. You are now saying in by so time, your legal tender will cease to become a legal tender.
So are you suggesting then that the deadline, which was extended by a week, it doesn't matter?
That is even a fire brigade approach. You cannot put, let's say you have extended it for 10 days. Now that he has explained that your money is still good, but bring your money to the bank. If you cannot make it within the window, it does not mean that your money is useless. So everybody can now go home and rest. Now, when you have the time, you know how Nigerians like to do everything last minute. You start rushing. But now that the explanation is there, that if you do not have the time, or all of a sudden, you discover you have kept some money, maybe in your jacket, you didn't change it. If it's 1,000, 2,000, it means a lot to some people. Then you can still go to the bank and say, this is my money. Then you still get value for your money because the government made it a legal tender. And you cannot just overnight say, this money, if you don't put it in the bank by so date, you are caught with it. And that is it. That is the impression people had ab initio. And that is where this problem actually came. Because there is no way. The intention of the CBN is to withdraw as much money from circulation as possible. But you cannot do that by fiat because some other areas of the economy will begin to suffer.
Can I ask you, did you support when the CBN said it was going to redesign sometime last year, were you in support of that, of the reasons that it gave, the fact that, you know, so much money was out of the system and it wanted to be able to bring that money back into the system and gain control of its currency once again?
There is no doubt that it has a lot of advantages. Bringing the money in, it gave so many reasons that are very valid. Money being paid to kidnappers, for terrorism, and some people later adduced it to money to pay for elections. How can you make a policy because we're having an election that will not endure? Election is just about maybe max 1 month. So I cannot take that as a legitimate reason to say I want to keep all the money in the bank. I don't want people to have money to spend.
Well, no, let us remember, because you are the one who's added the third one now. But that's not part of the reason that the CBN gave. The CBN gave the first two.
Yes, I said some people, not the CBN.
Which you talked about. So did you support that very first reason?
Oh, yes.
That, you know, they wanted to be able to gain control. So you thought that it was timely, and it was also a good reason for the CBN to have introduced the redesign at the time it did.
Now, if you are talking about timely, that's a different issue altogether. There have been terrorism in Nigeria predating Buhari's administration. And there has been kidnapping predating this administration as well. I was kidnapped in 2017. So I'm a victim. I understand the need to do something drastic to bring, some sanity into the system. So that if these people are getting money, we can trace it somehow. I support all those reasons. They're very genuine. It's the implementation, the timelines, that is the problem. Now, I don't think they did any trial version of the effect that we got. Because the moment ATMs were no longer dispensing, people had come to rely on this electronic banking. And the way they use it is to collect cash. Even on the POS terminal, there's supposed to be a means of doing electronic transactions. You send money, you pay, the merchant collects his money through his bank. But in Nigeria, it's being used for cash dispensing mostly. And so once you understand that this is the position, the culture of your people, now to change it is not something that you can do within 2, 3, or 9. You can't do it in 90 days. It has to be something that you plan systemically, and you continue to, as somebody brings old currency to the bank, you deposit it, you don't release any old currency out. You keep on giving them the new ones. But the money, the quantum of money available to the banks is certainly inadequate. Yeah, even so the banks are still having the old currencies. They pay with it now.
It would seem that, how do I put it now? It would seem that the CBN did that deliberately, even though I'm sure from his own calculations, he must have thought that the amount of cash which they had released should have been enough, assuming people were not taking these monies and using them for untoward actions. For instance, spraying them at Owambe in bundles and what have you. There are those kinds of situations which we have seen. Imagine that all of those kinds of monies were made available, because right now we don't even know how many more of those new currencies are in people's bedrooms. We don't know. So assuming things were distributed properly, don't you think that it would have had the right effect, considering also that they also wanted to introduce a cashless policy? It's been in existence for a long time. A lot of Nigerians are now doing their banking, via online means. And I'm sure that they must have relied on some data for them to say, if we have this much cash in circulation, it should have been enough. Don't you think that something went wrong in terms of how we all reacted to this particular policy?
Well, it's scarcity. We were saying that the foreign countries are very organized. When the train is supposed to arrive, in 5 minutes, you know it will be there. But there was a scenario that the train broke down. By the time a train now came, everybody started rushing. They forgot about the decency that they were already used to being on the queue. But they was fighting for it to just get in. When there is crisis, you always get the worst out of the human beings. Now, in Nigeria, where there is scarcity of currency, which is the legal tender, and you are estimating you have collected about 1.9 trillion of currency in circulation, and maybe you have made provision for 1 trillion. You assume that that 1.9 trillion only belongs to the rich people. No. People who go to the Bole woman, they want roasting yam on the roads. That is what they live on. And they pay their school fees from those little things. Are you now going to compel somebody selling on the street or selling Bole to start taking a card that has implications of cost? And that is another scenario that we're looking at, that even the CBN now wants to start issuing cards. So the question is, what is the role of the commercial bank? What is the role of the CBN? If the CBN is now going into the sphere of consumer banking. So the question we start asking is that we cause so much trouble trying to resolve issues without in-depth study of what is going on.
You're talking about the launch of Afrigo.
Whatever name they call it. That means for you to use a card, you must have an account somewhere. So is that account going to be in the CBN, where they now issue you a card for it? Or even if it's a credit card. So the CBN wants to now, is that they are doing social service and they are creating credit and put it on the debit card produced by the CBN.
But I heard they said they will work with the banks on that one.
So if they're working with the banks are already issuing debit cards to all their customers. You go to any bank now, average bank, you get your card, maybe 15, 30 minutes.
Yes, but there's a payment channel through which that that card is routed. For instance, it could be Verve, it could be MasterCard, it could be Visa. I think what they're saying is that Afrigo should now be one of the payment channels that
domiciled in Nigeria.
that cards are also
now
that banks should also be looking at.
That totally has no, even if it has precedence, it's not what people and civilized nations are used to. America does not own MasterCard. They don't own Visa. Nigeria has a card called Verve. You know, these are retail issues. It does not concern the CBN. All the CBN needs to do is, okay, you banks issue this, issue that, and put the policies in place to make sure that the thing works, either through NIPS and ensure that transaction goes seamlessly. When the central bank now says they're issuing a MasterCard, Afrigo Bank, a central bank card, for what purpose? Are you trying to compete with the domestic banks, with the commercial banks? Do you want to put, is there anybody who will say that CBN is issuing a card, who will not prefer to go and collect CBN's card and start looking at the commercial? There are tremendous implications on our economy. They should just drop it.
Okay. Well, the deadline for that currency, it still stands though. Because from what the CBN says, what that means is, well, you can bring your monies to the DMBs, deposit money banks, up until that deadline, after which you can then take it to the CBN.
Sure.
So I think that still subsists. So that
is
we'll just
fine.
put that in context.
But that is very fine. That's why I said, that's why I thanked Dokua and the CBN governor, at least for allowing the public to know that their money is not lost. So after the deadline, you can still take your money to the bank, only you will not be able to spend it on the street.
Yeah, so it will still cease to be a legal tender.
Yeah.
But you will not lose the value until you take it to the CBN.
Exactly. Or even to your commercial banks, you drop it to your bank. The bank understands the fact that you cannot just make by fiat that from tomorrow the money that you have, that you've labored for, is now useless.
Oh. But do you think that, with the window that, don't you think that with the window that has been given and the awareness that has been raised, don't you think that everybody who's affected by this, who still has old currency with them, should by now have been able to find some means to, you know, get their currency to the bank by now. I mean, as long as that money is legitimate.
It's not even the problem of the consumers. When you take money to the bank, even before that deadline, you could not get new currencies, new notes. I went to the bank, and I was paid old notes. And of course,
when was that? How long
last
ago?
week. Last week.
Last week is no longer this week, Senator.
Last week.
The point I'm trying to make is that
Yes.
it is possible that by this week, the circumstances might have changed.
No, even if you say it, yes, it would have improved.
Yeah.
But if you say you are giving 1 week window for people to go and put all their monies in the bank, can the banks handle it? Are they prepared for that? So when everybody starts queuing, so that's why you must manage the implementation of these policies. So, and of course, most of the money in circulation on the people holding POS terminals, they are still collecting the old currency. And of course, let me remind you, the issue of people having new notes and they are spraying it, this is the time that the CBN should have activated the policy of if you spray money or you matter of money or you do all that, it's a 6 months J term. That was passed in 2007. It's still there. It's just that making it effective, enforcing it became a big challenge. Unless you now have to have every EFCC staff in every party, either in Lagos or in Abuja or Port Harcourt, anywhere, it's not practicable. But when it becomes very glaring that you are breaking the law and you want to put some sanity, you can maybe 1 or 2 people as examples. So the issue of now taking new notes and be spraying them, in fact, I saw one of these musicians just push somebody off. It was trending a few days back. So you look at it that we have the laws. Let us, for God's sake, implement those that we can implement to make life easier. People are really talking about this spraying of new currencies. That is illegal.
They're not really so much quarreling with the spraying of the currency. They are quarreling with the fact that the currency is available at parties, but it's not available on the streets for people to spend. That's where the quarrel seems to lie.
Well, again, if good planning had gone into this, and you have withdrawn about 1.9 trillion. If you put 1 trillion back, at least people have access to their money. Part of the difficulty I still cannot understand is why, on the average, maybe weekly, some of us might be spending 100K. It's not impossible. I mean, even as a politician, you see people calling you. Not all of them have a bank account.
The CBN has said you're in the minority.
Of course, but the majority of the people who have 5,000, 1,000, and they cannot have access to their money is the major problem. That is why the crisis came. I just told you, we pay our caddies 3,000 naira.
You can do that with a transfer.
Well, if they don't have a bank account, how do you do it? And by the time you do transfer, you're already taxing the person. Because when you do transfer, there's cost implication.
For you?
To another bank. Of course.
For you, not for the...
Exactly. Do I want to pay tip on 3,000 naira? Because already the official money is 2,500. So I'm already giving 3,000 to assist. Sometimes I pay 4,000. So when you look at all this...
Wait, Senator, golfers don't want to pay that.
They don't want to pay 10 naira on...
No.
Because the CBN has also graded how much it is that you pay on transfers. If it's less than 10,000 naira, I think it's about 10 naira or so, or 20 naira. That you pay on top of the transfer charge. So
yes,
well, when you talk about... So you don't want to pay...
It's a tax. It's even by the time I do that. No, wait a minute. By the time I pay my own tax on the money I've transferred to the person.
Yes.
Now, there are service charges for anybody using the bank services. If the guy now transfers to another person, he still pays another service fee.
It's an if.
So how does he have access to the money?
He can
if you are not saying you can no longer spend
withdraw it as an ATM.
So, and by the time you withdraw an ATM, they will tell you there's a service charge. And you still have to pay that.
if we common men are doing this calculation, people will understand. But Senator, golfers don't want to take this money on the lighter note.
Let me tell you, some senators are retired, though. So
but they're still golfing, and we know that golf clubs are not cheap.
Of course, it's even better for you to exercise than to be paying money to the hospitals.
Okay, well, one thing about Senator, are you concerned about this Afrigo card? I mean, because you're associated with MasterCard or something?
Yeah, well, again, when I built the infrastructure for the banks to start issuing MasterCard in Nigeria, this was way back in 2000, between 2000 and 2004. We started issuing the cards in 2004. It took 4 years because we didn't have all these pervasive internet facilities. We had to buy a VSAT to be able to talk to St. Louis. We have to connect the banks, you know. So the challenges were much. Thank God things are a lot easier today. At that time, we only spoke to the CBN that we needed a license. The CBN was not issuing any license at that time. My license was the very first switching license, and it didn't have any time limit. And of course, today I've been talking to them. What happened? They said this new policy, you have to pay 2 billion now. So would I ever have been able to start? So there are some things that, you know, when you begin to look at it, the CBN over the years, they have improved significantly. They have helped assist this economy in no small measure. But when you want to put a policy down, focus, study it, make sure you understand the impact on society and on the economy. Because if you shut down an economy for 3, 4, 5 days, only God knows how much you have lost directly or indirectly.
So for you, the bone of contention is that it is the CBN that's coming up with this Afrigo, that if it were another independent or private agency or individual or concern, you won't have any challenge with it.
The banks are licensed. They are the depository banks. They are the ones that hold the money, they issue the cards out. And we don't have shortage of banks in Nigeria. We have people who can issue the cards just like that. So it is not about availability of the cards. The cards are available. If you own a bank account, you will already be given a debit card. It's almost automatic now.
So you are afraid of this policy because you are a player in the sector. You think that the CBN as a regulator should not be involved in this?
It's even more or less the business of the banks.
Because I heard you
to be saying these things.
Because you said that if the CBN has a card, who would want the other cards as opposed to the card that the
as
CBN
a consumer,
itself
if the
issues?
CBN tells me that I have a card, I will go for CBN's card rather than be having one card here, having one card there. But that way, the implication is very, very significant for our economy. If you want to kill the business of the commercial banks, the service they normally know how to provide, and the CBN now takes that over, there is no way you can justify. It's not done anywhere. So the banks should be allowed to continue to open their individual accounts, which they are doing, and at the same time issue out those debit cards. I don't think it's the shortage. It is the shortage of the people that own bank accounts that we have. It is not the shortage of cards for them. Once you open your bank account now, they give you your ATM card. Any bank in Nigeria will do that. So I believe if the banks, they don't meet with the CBN governor, when this kind of policy comes, is there not one of them that can say, excuse me, sir, Mr. Governor, are you not competing with us? Maybe they'll be afraid that the man might take their license. Do you know the problem? I mean, that's the problem of people you put at head of affairs in Nigeria. So people are afraid. Why should you not raise that? The function of the CBN is the bankers, the banker to the banks and to the government, not to the individual. So I think they should look at that. Yeah.
Well, there we go. At least now people know that some golfers put a lot of thoughts to paying caddies. It doesn't just happen like that. Well, thank you, Senator, for coming on. He's the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Privatization, Senator Ayuari Sheikh.